Alright guys, welcome back to Hooked Up Wisconsin. Today I'm going to be talking about early season trout fishing. We're going to go show you the ropes on exactly my favorite way to catch these trout in the early season. Here in Wisconsin, that means catch and release. Where you're from, you may be able to keep some trout early in the year. And when I say early in the year, I'm talking right as that snow melt is kind of ending and there's runoff in the creeks and the rivers from the snow melt. That water's still pretty cold and it's high, usually a little bit high. There's some color to it, and the trout are just moving out of that winter pattern into that spring pattern, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So in this video, we're going to cover the baits we're using and exactly how to work those baits, and also fish location, where those fish are holding in the river this time of year, presentation, how fast to present the baits, and I'm going to go over rods and reels, line I'm using, all kinds of different information. So this is going to be a really good video for you guys to learn about early season trout. So let's get into it. My buddy Blake and I met up the other day to try some early season trout fishing, and we found some fish, but it was fairly slow. But then all of a sudden we got into a pot of them, and this is what happened.
Blake, how's it going?
Not bad.
How's the river look?
Doesn't look too bad, I don't think.
Oh, it looks good. Any fish yet?
Nope. Only been here about 5 minutes, but
Okay.
I don't want to venture too far off without you.
Yeah. Blake just pulled the first trout of the day. We went to our brookie spot and there was no fish there yet, which sometimes happens when in winter time the fish aren't exactly in the same spot, but just landed the first nice little brown there.
Yeah, not bad at all.
That's a good start. There's one. Hey, brookie. Nice. Trying a few different things today, and I just decided to try the old Meps. You don't want it too warm. It's like 42 degrees today, which is exactly what we want. If it gets too warm, it actually drops the water temperature because the snow runoff cools it, the melting snow. So just a little bit of runoff with some sun on the water is just perfect.
Just a little guy, but really pretty.
Yep, it's about the size of the one I just caught, maybe a little smaller. There you go. Yeah, that's not a bad fish. Oh, there you go. He was right by you. Blake's just smoking me. That's a nice brown. Very pretty. Nice. Oh, that's a gorgeous fish.
Oh yeah. Gotta love that.
Oftentimes what you find in the winter like this is when you find one fish, there'll be a bunch because they're stacking up in the slower moving water. And we fished quite a bit today already and haven't found much, but now we got a little run here that seems to be holding some fish. And Blake's catching them on a little plastic, right?
Yeah, your tackle B vibe, gold. That's always my go-to for trout.
So I'm gonna probably switch to the same thing. That's what I started with, but we just hadn't found the fish yet, so I'm gonna switch back. Nice one.
Thank you.
So a couple quick tips when you're rigging plastics for trout is you want to get that thing perfectly straight on the jig so it doesn't wobble back and forth. Thread it on, then pop it over that lock on that jig and make sure that that thing's lined up just the way you want it with no bend right here. You don't want this to bend down. You want that to be nice and straight so it tracks straight in the current. There's one. Yep. Not a big one, but there you got him. Another little brookie. Nice. Blake's checking his trout routes. We're gonna start looking for another spot like this one, hopefully. We probably had a dozen bites in that hole, huh?
Yeah, I would say from maybe 14, 15 maybe.
Yeah, 14, 15. Landed a few. Nothing huge, but finally got on some fish.
So as you can see, we were having really good luck using just a jig and a small swim bait. And this is a really overlooked presentation for trout. And I'm going to get into that right now, exactly the specifics of how we rig these jigs up, what we're looking for in a small swim bait for trout, and how to throw them, how to use them, how to present them. So before we get into the jigs themselves, I'm going to just go over my rod and reel setup here really quick. This is a St. Croix Triumph medium light 6'6" fast action rod, and this is what I use for 90% of my trout fishing when I'm using spinning gear. I like a 6'6" for trout fishing because a lot of times you're navigating tighter spots, getting in between tag alders and flipping and pitching little casts. So I like to have a little bit shorter rod for trout. I don't like it to be too long. And then I like that fast action. Gives me a little bit of give in the tip when the fish takes that lure. They can take it in, but then lots of backbone to get them out of those log jams and stuff. So this is a really good setup. And then I've just got a Daiwa Regal on here, which, as you know, I've used these for years. I really like them. They got a good drag. They're very solid reel for the price. And by the way, I'll leave links in the description for all this stuff down below. But on that, I've got 10-pound braid. I like high-vis braid. Because I want to be able to see where that line is when it's in the water, even in low light. I want to be able to track that line. And obviously when you're using high-vis braid, you want to go with a leader on there that trout aren't going to see. So I'm using a 8-pound fluorocarbon leader, probably about 4 to 6 feet long on this one. This is probably a 4-foot leader, something like that. And I've just gone straight to the braid with a FG knot right here. Super good knot. You can watch lots of videos on how to tie that knot, but very slick, goes through the guides, so I can tie a 6-foot leader and reel it right through the guides, no problem. So that's my rod and reel setup. And then on the end of there, I've got a Euro Tackle soft lock jig. This is a tungsten jig. I love these jigs. They've got a nice solid hook. If you hook a big fish, they're not going to bend out on you. And they've got that soft lock ball, so you can kind of hold that plastic really well. And you know, tungsten is more expensive, but you're gonna get better hold in the current. It's gonna get down farther in those holes, and I think it's worth it to fish tungsten for this application, just because it holds up in the current really well. So that's what I've got on the jig. Now for the soft plastics, this is the cool part. What we're using is Euro Tackle B-Vibes. Now these are probably the best small swim bait I've ever found. I mean, not even probably, hands down. This little tail just kicks even at super slow speeds. I mean, oftentimes these trout this time of year are not super hot. They're not super aggressive, so you want to be able to move that jig real slowly, even swing it sometimes and have that tail kicking. Now there's 2 different sizes with these B-Vibes. This is a 2-inch right here, and they also make an 1.5 inch. I like to start with the 2-inch, but if I'm getting short strikes, I'll switch to the 1.5 inch just to bring that hook a little bit closer to the tail and hopefully catch some of those short biters. But as far as colors go, in semi-clear water, even stained water, clear water, I'm going to use gold. That's my favorite trout color. For whatever reason, the trout just seem to like it. It's kind of a yellow clear plastic with gold flake, and that's going to be my go-to. There's a couple other colors that will work in stained water, especially, you know, like this red and black. That's a good color for stained water. And even a black flake like this one, that'll show up in murkier water, just that dark profile. I tend to stay away from super bright colors like chartreuse and pink for trout, because they're a little bit more wary of those really bright colors, and so I tend to stick with more natural, especially in clear water. So as far as rigging these goes, we're going to rig up one right now, and you can see right there that thing is straight as an arrow, and that's the key. You don't want that thing swimming side to side. You don't want it kind of wobbling in the current. You want just that tail kicking and the body to go perfectly straight, and that's what we're looking for. That's all there is to it. Pretty much anywhere there's trout, they will eat that bait. I'm telling you right now. So once again, I will leave a link in the description for those as well. Now as far as how we're going to fish this bait, the beauty of this bait is there's almost no wrong way to fish a little swim bait like this. We've caught fish casting upstream and retrieving downstream. We've caught fish throwing across the current and then retrieving it and letting it swing down and then back up. We've caught fish, like in this video that you just saw, we caught fish throwing straight down current and pulling this jig up slowly upstream, and the trout were just crushing it. So in lower water, when you don't have a lot of current, you're probably best off casting upstream and retrieving down. That's a typical general rule for trout. You know, cast quartering upstream and bring it down and swing it across. But in certain cases, when the water is really cold, you may want to cast downstream and just slowly move it upstream, and that slower presentation can really work well in cold water. And then swinging the jig, casting straight across and letting it swing down across a hole, that's another great way to present it. So it certainly is good to vary your retrieve, but I've probably caught the most trout just on a straight retrieve, just letting that tail kick, you know, speed it up a little bit, slow it down a little bit, and that's probably going to catch you the most fish. You can do a little rip pause. There's a lot of ways to retrieve the bait, and like I said, some days one way is going to trigger trout, some days another way is going to trigger trout. So vary your speed, vary your retrieve until you find what they're looking for. So the next thing I'm going to kind of talk about is just a few tips on what to look for as far as water goes. You know, obviously the water can be pretty cold this time of year, and as the temperatures warm up, you want to fish on the rising temperatures. So a lot of times afternoons are better. As far as height, you know, as far as the river coming up, a little bit of color is great. You don't want to fish a river that's blown out, you know, that's got muddy water way over the banks. It's going to be really difficult to catch trout in those conditions. But if it's inside the banks and just a little high with some color to it, no problem. That'll work really well. So that's kind of what you're looking for. And then as far as places to fish on the river, again, probably stay away from those smaller creek arms and the upper reaches of the river. Fish those lower sections, the bigger sections. You got to keep moving until you find a hole with fish in it. These trout are not going to be everywhere like they are in this late spring and summertime. They're not going to be spread out. They're going to be in pockets. Don't give up just because you aren't catching them. Make sure that you keep moving and just methodically break down that water until you start getting bites, and then stick it out until you catch a few trout. They stop biting, you move on. One of my favorite spots to fish for trout in, you know, this period, this early season period, is a larger hole below some sort of fast moving water. So in this next couple clips here, I'll show you what I mean. The next one is going to be a larger river where there's some faster water coming into a nice deep pool, and the trout will stack up there. And then the clip after that is actually a culvert where water's coming out of the culvert, and it's just a small stream, but it creates a big pool below that culvert, and that tends to hold trout in the wintertime. So check this out and you'll see what I'm talking about.
Oh, there's one. There's one. There we go. Nice brown. Smoked that jig in plastic. That was a nice little fish. Caught him again on the B vibe. There's one. Oh, nice one. Nice one. I gotta get down to land this one, I think. Oh yeah. Look at that fish. Gorgeous brown right there. Smoked that plastic again. Very pretty fish. Let that guy go.
Now, as you can see, those are totally different size of water bodies, but they both had trout in them. They were both the same scenario, a nice big hole below some faster water. So keep an eye out for that when you're looking for these winter trout. Now, as you can see, I enjoy fishing with these jigs and plastics. It's a really effective technique. But you can also throw spinners, you know, little stick baits this time of year. Anything that resembles a bait fish is a great way to catch these fish. And fly fishing works really well too. You know, you can drift nymphs, you can throw streamers. So, you know, whatever works for you, get out, try a little early season trout fishing, and get hooked up, guys. We'll see you next time.